Welcome to episode 15 of the DevDecoder podcast. It's been a little bit of a break, hasn't it, Rebecca?
Someone's been off work.
Yes. Some of us have been climbing mountains and enjoying ourselves.
Literally, or...
literally climbed Mount Snowdon, and then I went up Coniston Old Man on my break, took a bunch of young people up a
been
mountain.
working hard, yeah.
Yeah, having a bit of fun and a bit of time. Been enjoying it. Funnily enough, actually, you know, I mean, as you know, I get asked a lot to get involved in things.
No one asked you that.
But you know, people do ask me that. Because seriously, I just been offered a new job role on a new board of directors. Seriously, have you heard of Old MacDonald Farm? They've asked me to be the new international CIEIO.
That's really bad. It's got nothing to do with what we just talked about. So over the past couple of weeks, you know how excited I've been.
You're generally always excited. It's hard to tell if it's actually for any good reason.
But I've come into the office and I've been pretty excited about a few things. Things that you can relate to.
Okay.
Because you're a gamer.
I am a gamer, yes.
So what can you remember what I've come into the office?
Yes, because you found your PlayStation 2, didn't you?
I did.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to tell me. Okay.
I'm my heart.
You're going to tell me that actually how disappointed you are that Sony have just announced that they are...
They've got rid of the repair services in Japan.
Which is the last place I think they were doing them.
Did I get that right? Japan?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's been 18 years, hasn't it, since...
And how weird is it, though, that, like, 2 weeks ago, I found my PlayStation 2, and now after 18 years, they're getting rid of it.
You know what's weirder is that I do quite a bit of youth work, and a lot of the young people I work with are like 17, 16 years old. And it's the thought that they weren't born when the PlayStation 2 came out.
They didn't get to experience Spyro the Dragon.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Now, I know why you're excited, though. Because you're not excited about the fact that Sony have stopped doing support for fixing PS2s. And to be fair, I think the aftermarket on this is going to be for many years to come. So there's so many of these. They sold many millions of units. And there's plenty of people out there that will still fix and repair PS2 and will be for years to come. I think it's just going to be one of those things because it's such a popular console. But... I think that's not why you're excited, is it, Rebecca?
No.
What have you been doing, Rebecca?
I'm a bit ashamed to say it, Craig.
No, I think you should admit it. I think we should let people know that it's okay. It's okay, Rebecca.
I may have purchased various games for the PS2.
What did you get?
So I got Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. Spyro A Hero's Tale.
I think I can sense a theme. Okay.
Need for Speed.
Classic.
And my boyfriend just bought Crash Bandicoot last night.
Crash Bandicoot.
The Wrath of Cortex. See, I know this stuff now. What's going on?
And you've been basically playing them every night, haven't you?
Yeah. I left an event last week and Sydney, our PR assistant, was like, what are you going to do now? And I was like, I'm going to go and play Spyro.
But you know what this actually demonstrates, though? Just in all seriousness, because... one of the things I think this really shows is one of the reasons why indie gaming has become so popular in recent years, especially, and also retro gaming. Now, retro gaming is basically games that are old games, etc. Because a lot of the AAA studios just churn out yet another FPS first-person shooter game or another standard generic rip-off.
It's all the same now.
Yeah, it's all a bit the same. But one of the beauties of having that limited palette, that limited set of things you can work with, older graphics, sprite-based graphics, for example, on the older systems than PS2. PS2 was actually quite a good machine and quite good graphics. But one of the things that being more constrained did is force you to focus more on gameplay. And some of the old retro games and some of the indie games coming out now, because they don't have the big budgets and can't spend fortunes on audio and graphics and assets and stuff, they have to focus on what makes this fun to play. And there's a real lesson in there, I think, for a lot of the major game studios.
Spyro.
Yeah, Spyro's a great game. It's actually really playable. It's really good fun. I think that sometimes the games industry plays it too safe now. It's a bit like the movie industry as well. when you've got all these great CGI effects and all the other stuff, it's sometimes just a little bit easier to throw action at a screen and go, that's it, we're done. We know what the formula is for creating something great. This leads to something that I'm quite excited about as well. I watched a documentary on Sky Arts the other day. It was on my Now TV subscription. So.
Okay.
It was called Computer Says Show. Have you heard about this?
No, but I know the computer says no. That's
the job. But the Computer Says Show one was, as you may or may not know about me, I'm quite a fan of musicals.
What? Really?
Yeah, I do like my musical. Vivian and I went to see Hamilton recently. You're not going to get me down.
You like The Greatest Showman, though, don't you, Craig?
I do quite like. I like the music. I think the story. The story is not all representative of the historical fact, but
sing a song.
I don't think we'll subject our listeners to that. But they did. They had a computer producing. Assisting. They said it was the world's first computer generated musical. That's actually. It's complete rubbish. It wasn't computer generated. It was heavily computer assisted. They used computers to pick what the plot should be by analysing other ones, picking the beats during, the emotional beats during the plot, and picking the some of the tunes and creating the tunes and creating some suggestions for lyrics. About a quarter of the lyrics were generated automatically by a computer. Picking a lot of the melodies and stuff like that, auto-generated all that stuff, but they actually used real composers to stick the whole thing together into something a bit more coherent. And what they came up with was actually a good musical. It's actually quite good. It's not brilliant. I think you got 3 stars on average, so it's not like amazing or anything, but it's quite competent. But what struck me about that was actually, I think humans have gone a bit like that. We kind of formulaically produce stuff now as safe bets that are 3-star.
That people are going to like because they like something that's in the market already.
Yeah. So we know that if we make a mobile, an overhead shooter like Dota Clone or something like that, it's probably going to create revenue through esports and stuff if it succeeds. It's the old Flappy Birds principle, right? That Flappy Bird sold a load of units. Now every game that comes out for the next year has to be Flappy Bird. So, it's that kind of thing. There's a lot of cloning going on. It's always been part of the industry, but where the industry really takes off is when there's innovation, where people just go out there and do something a little bit different. And it's not about spending loads of money. It's about being creative. And actually, I think that's where we have less to fear about AI, and we have less to fear about computers. If we really embrace that bit that makes us human, and that ability just to create something completely new and maybe just a little bit risky and a little bit far out, and something that everyone else tells us is not going to work. But when it does, it's just something very beautiful and different.
Back to the podcast. So my favourite animal is a sloth. That's not the fact. Oh, it is a fact.
It is a fact.
But it's not the fact of the podcast.
You know what? I could absolutely believe that would be your favourite animal as well.
Why? Why would you believe that, Craig?
It's probably your spirit animal, in fact, isn't it?
Sleeps a lot.
Uh-huh.
I actually held a sloth. And anyway.
Okay.
Sloths mistakenly grab their arms instead of branches, and then they fall to their deaths. That's a fact.
Of course, we're not laughing at this. Sloth deaths are a serious issue, and we want to extend our deepest, sincere sympathies to the families of the deceased sloths.
It's a fact.
It's a good fact.
Rebecca's back to the podcast.
Hi again, Craig.
Hi, Jack.
Hi. So today I thought... So this will be quite a useful one for me because every year you give a training session to all the new starters we get about programming paradigms, and you do a few talking about the different ones and their applications.
Yeah.
But for one reason or other, both times they've been on, I've not been able to attend either of them. So I thought today we could talk about programming paradigms and how they can help you focus your thoughts and focus your efforts in terms of development.
I think there's lots of ways of approaching how to be a software developer and how to write code and how to solve problems. And one of the ones that I found helpful as to explain things. It's often helpful to hang them on something, to have a structure. You know this as a teacher. If you just go to something cold and say, let's today learn about imaginary numbers, it's very hard for people then to understand why or understand the concept. So I try to approach, one of the ways I try to teach programming, and it's not the only way, there's lots of ways of approaching it, but I try to go through almost a history of how programming languages have evolved.
And go through logically, chronologically.
Yeah, because what you find is that evolution happened for reasons.
Yeah. And
when you understand the reasons, it makes the paradigms more easy to understand.
It's very similar when I was teaching physics, is that antiparticles are a good example, that you follow through the maths and you end up with something with a negative energy or something like that.
Yes.
It's like, well, then obviously there must be something opposite to matter.
Yes.
And it's the logicals follow through the maths, and then you're like, oh, so this is a thing that should exist, and it happens to.
Yeah, and if you look through even simpler terms than that, when people teach physics, they start with things like Pythagoras theorem in maths at an earlier age, and then they slowly, before you know, you're at E equals MC squared, and the square is actually from Pythagoras theorem. But to get there, you have to start with the basics, and it's easier to actually follow through the history of how people got there themselves, because there's been a journey to get there, and that journey is actually in many ways the most logical way of getting there.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that almost bizarre that a lot of universities and schools, etc., they don't teach programming from a historical perspective, but there is a history. We've had coding languages here for 80 years. And that might not seem a long time, but there's a lot of history happening in that time, a lot of evolution.
There might be a difference between the history of programming languages and who developed what and things like that, and then following through the same logic they did. Because when I was doing physics, the history of who did what wasn't as interesting, but following their steps was certainly worthwhile.
Yeah, and I don't go on and talk about... it's hard not to do any teaching about computer science and not talk about Turing at least once. Yeah. But I don't go through and list all the various steps and everything, but I find following that logical order really helpful. So programming paradigms... When I teach them, I go for the historical point, and what I do is I start with imagining an old 1960s movie with the big computer in the background and the little tape machine, and the big tape machines with big spools of tapes running through, and you used to see the reels spinning, and as the reels are spinning, you did the buzzing and LEDs flashing and all the rest of it, old computers. And that leads us to a paradigm called sequential programming. And sequential programming is one of the most important programming paradigms, and that we try to get people to understand, especially starters. And it's that computers do things in order, and the order in which they do them matters. Yeah. And if you change the order, things go badly wrong. And I often start that paradigm by talking to people about BIDMAS and BODMAS, which they've done in maths. Yeah. So it's either BIDMAS or BODMAS, depending on who taught you, which is the order of operations in a mathematical formula. Yeah. Which is a grand way of saying that brackets mean that you consider the brackets first, then indexes or ordinals, that's the BIDMAS or BODMAS. Division and multiplication are actually the same importance or significance, or as we say in coding terms, precedence. And then you've got addition and subtraction. Yeah. And if you think about it, if you've got a simple formula which is 1 plus 2 divided by 3, well, if you do the addition first, then you get 1 plus 2, which is 3, and then you've got 3 divided by 3, which is 1. But if you do the division first, you get 2 divided by 3, which is 0.666 recurring, and then you've got 1 plus 0.666 recurring, and what you end up with is 1.6666.
So the order of things matter because it affects the outcome.
Yes. So if you do the division first, you get a different order than the addition first. You might say we just do everything from left to right. The problem with that is if you're Hebrew, you do everything from right to left. Right? So there's always an ordering, you can pick whatever ordering you want, but it matters what the order is. And in maths, for example, and in programming, we actually give precedence not just in a simple left to right order. Okay, we fall back on that when things have what we call the same precedence. So if, for example, if you've got both a multiplication and a division, they have the same precedence, so you read them from left to right.
And in terms of actually working out the answer, it doesn't matter which one you do first.
In commutative ones, it doesn't, no. That's one of the reasons why precedence, we tend to give them the same precedence, because it doesn't matter the order. There are, though, in certain operators that have the same precedence in programming languages where the order still matters. Yeah. But the rule is very simple. You take them in the same precedence group. You do the operators in the highest precedence first, and then you work your way down the precedence groups and do the orders with the lowest operator precedence. And in all programming languages that most people know, the lowest precedence operators tend to be the assignment operators.
Yeah.
So you get the result, but the last thing you do is assign it to a variable.
Yeah.
Right? So when, and then some of the highest precedence operators tend to be the dereferencing operators in object-oriented programming languages, i.e. the dot, or the brackets for calling a function invocation operators. Now that's all very highly technical, but the point is the order in which you do an operation matters.
And you should consider that when you're developing your
code. You
code.
must know that when you're writing your code. It gets complex when we go into asynchronous programming, but that's a much later historical step. So we say to people, the order you do your operation matters, and it does. You can't just write a whole bunch of instructions. But a way for a normal, a non-programmer to think of this is if you're cooking, right? The order in which you do operations there matters as well. For example, if you split your egg before you put it in the frying pan, you're going to get an omelette. Otherwise, you're going to get a boiled egg.
Yeah.
Right?
So you can't put all your cake ingredients in a bowl, bake it, and then mix it last. That's
exactly.
not how it works.
No, you have to do things in a set order. And that's called sequential programming. You might think, well, it seems a bit obvious. Why do we have to talk about that? Well, because understanding just the importance of that prevents you from getting confused about what's going to happen, and it makes you understand that you need to be able to read code in a certain order. Just like when you read words, you have to read them in a certain order.
And it's talking about it now, while it is a very obvious thing to consider, like obviously it's going to do one thing at a time and then the next and then the next.
Yeah.
I don't off the top of my head know the precedence of a lot of the things that I'm using in my code.
Yeah.
So it's
I teach all our new starters when they first start what the importance of operator precedence, and then I give them some examples of how unstuck you can get if you don't know that. So I do generally for most languages. The first thing I normally look up, for example, in C#, it's the language specification. I think it's section 7.2.1. It's operator precedence and associativity, which tells you what order the operations will work in. And you must know that to really understand your language. So I say to people, unless you know the operator precedence and associativity, you can't read code. Yeah, so you're always going to be dependent on F5 debugging.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what order things are going to happen, and the order in which they happen matters.
Do you find that the precedence is fairly consistent across languages?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but there are languages that subvert it deliberately for various reasons. And those subversions can cause really subtle bugs. So people that don't, the most common set of operator precedences are the ones that you find in the C-like languages. Those languages are largely influential in most modern programming languages, but there are subtle ones in other languages, and you get some of the older languages in particular where maybe the authors of those languages didn't spend enough time thinking about operator precedence and associativity. Okay. You do find some pretty interesting, really that's the choice they made about the precedence, so it's not always the same. So it's worth always going and checking. One of the rumours going around is that Samsung are about to announce a new foldable phone. So they're going to give you a phone that's flexible and can be basically folded in half. Maybe even be rollable, like you can roll it up or something like that.
No.
Yeah, that's what.
Well, how do you fold it though without it breaking?
Well, yeah. One of the things most people don't realise is the LED screen on something that it's not LED these days. It's OLED. One of the things most people don't realise is that the screens on their mobile phones, the actual bit that shows you the display, is actually just a film. It's already flexible. It's normally stuck to a piece of Gorilla Glass, which is strong, tough glass that's not going to be destroyed. But actually, the screens themselves are already often flexible enough to be rolled to a certain dimension. Okay, so you could put them on a more flexible piece of glass already. You could already put. The problem is that it's not the screens that are not flexible. It's often the circuit boards behind them and the chips and all the little components on that can't bend because of the way they're manufactured. So it's not really the issue in the screen itself. It's been the biggest issue. It's been a lot of electronics behind those screens.
Well, the rest of it.
Well, because if you think the phone's a lot more than just the screen. There's the antennas, there's all that. And actually a lot of the stuff in there is flexible and can move. It's just wires and stuff like that. But they're on circuit boards that are fixed, that they're very rigid and they'll just snap and break. And of course, as you joints in particular get weakened by being flexed and tension, as do wires, etc. So the danger, there's lots of components that have been solved over the years. For example, you can print circuit boards on more flexible sheets as well, and they can have a certain bend tolerance, and so that you can get a level of flexibility already. The issue with the fold in general is that folds become the weak point where like things break across the fold. Folds are a lot more difficult than bends. So if you think of a radius, if the radius isn't too big, actually your phone already bends, as you know. The iPhone bends by design to a certain level.
So can you so you just fold it into whatever shape you want? So if I've got like a little pocket, can I fold it into a cube and put it in my pocket?
Well, the interesting thing is that this is, as far as I can assess, this is more of a rumour. When the BBC reached out to Samsung, they've said they've got nothing they're going to announce right now, that the technology's there. But actually, they've raised a point that I thought was more interesting, which is, what's the use case? Right? We've seen, for example, over the years, sci-fi deal with this, and TV shows and movies like show the examples of like foldy, flexy screens that you can interact with, and I think they are going to come. But it's only the danger is that, do people actually want a screen that actually flexes and folds? Do we want to be able to just roll it up and stick it in our pocket? And is it a mobile phone that we want to be like flexible like that, or is it some? I think where they're seeing it is more, if you think of older phones, one of the things we did to make the phone small enough so they could go in a small pocket was you'd put a fold in it, so you'd have the keypad and the screen.
And then it'd go like that.
Yeah, and clamshell phones, basically.
Oh, those are the best.
Right? So the suggestion is here that, of course, people are getting wanting their phones to be bigger screened. So you're seeing things like the predominance of the iPhone X, the Google phones. A lot of these phones now are coming in 10 and 11 inch. They're getting bigger and bigger. And the reason behind that is because people are using them as their first screen. So they're watching TV on them, they're playing games on them, and they want those screens to be bigger and bigger. But you also then lose the portability of the screen being too big. If you get to something like the Switch, you probably got to this, the Nintendo Switch, which has been a hugely popular sellable device, and it's portable. But you're probably reaching the limits of how big you want it to be before you really just can't call it portable, because it's what you do as it is. It can't fit in a pocket.
I mean, I've got like the 7 Plus.
Yeah.
And even that, I feel like it's an iPad.
Yeah, and I've got an X, and the X is even bigger. Actually, the X, I think, it's a bigger screen, but slightly smaller than the 7 Plus. But I had the 7 Plus as well. I actually quite like that, and the reason I want those is because I want that screen real estate, because I do so much work on my iPhone.
Oh, really?
Right, as you know. So I think that's where the first iterations of this be, that you probably can only fold them in a fixed way. Like, it might actually be like a clamshell, quite hard, but with a fold in the middle, and the screen goes across the fold, etc. That's possibly what these are going to do in the first iterations of these things. But ultimately, one of the things a lot of companies have looked at is, can we create like walls that you can just roll out a screen on a wall, for example? I think that's where this will get exciting, is when the size of the screen is much bigger than the phone form factor. Well, that was episode 15 of the DevDecoder podcast, and it's been quite exciting to do it this week, because this is probably going to be our first vodcast episode on YouTube.
Or vlogcast.
No, vodcast. We've decided it's vodcast.
I
Because
disagree.
vlogcast is effectively a blog.
I know, a video blog.
And it's not a blog. It's not a video blog. It's a video podcast.
Vlodcast.
So it's definitely
Vlodcast.
vodka. No, it's a vodcast.
Vlodcast.
Why Vlod? What's Vlod got to do with anything? So it's definitely vodcast.
Videocast.
This is why I make the important decisions.
Videocast.
So with that wonderful insight, I think we can call this episode completed.
Thank
and hopefully
goodness.
our audience won't be put off from joining us on episode 16.
I'm the best part of this videocast.
Oh my word.